Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
It's Jessa. I'm back for another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. I'm so glad you're here with me this week. I want to make sure that you know that in 2019, I have started offering free monthly webinars that include open question and answer. So this is available to everybody that is on my mailing list, which you can join at seattlesextherapist.com/list, or if you just go to the website, you'll see ways to join. But basically, everybody that's part of my community that's following will get the links to join these webinars that I plan to offer at 2 different times during the month for some flexibility. And they'll include this live Q&A. I'm just looking for ways to offer information and support and value, really, to all of my listeners. So if you are not part of that list yet, I would invite you to join in. Today's episode is another one of my Soapbox episodes. That's what I'm calling them, because I get to just talk about what I think. What I think is important, what I have learned in my work with couples, as a sex therapist, ways I'm putting together ideas that hopefully will help you. That's the point. So I am talking today about changing our mindset about sex and about relationships, right? I'm going to challenge some ideas about what sex is, and especially what are the rules in relationship. There are a lot of things I see in the way people behave and the assumptions that they have about relationships that I think get in your way. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, laying out all kinds of what I call new rules for relationships, as well as what really is sex. So I hope you find this helpful. So today I'm going to be talking about changing your mindset when it comes to sex. So to take you back just a little bit, I talked about the sexual avoidance cycle. I think it was in episode 40. Which is a circle that goes between disappointment in sex, feeling like something's broken, feeling afraid, which leads to avoidance of sex and avoidance of even talking about it, potentially with our partner, which leads to increased pressure on your sex life and pressure on any sex that you actually have, which then perpetuates a sense of disappointment, right? This is a cycle people get stuck in. Then in, I think it was episode 47, isn't this good? I have these numbers on the top of my head. I was talking about the disappointment part of the process, because that comes from unrealistic expectations. Okay, so I was tackling, where do these expectations come from? What are the myths that we have bought when it comes to sex? All these ideas that set us up to fail. Basically, right? At least to feel like we're failing. So today I'm going to talk about what do we replace these with? If we give up the bad expectations, these unrealistic ones, these ideas of sex that don't work for us, what do we do instead? So today I'm talking about changing your mindset when it comes to sex. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about what I'm calling some new rules for your relationship. Like, I want to help you guys get on the same page with some common understandings, some assumptions that you can share about how things are going to work from now on that I think serve you best. I mean, this is all my opinion, right? But when I work with couples, these are the strategies and the agreements that I would like people to have, because I think it sets you up for success. So I want to start with this idea of how do we even define what sex is? I mean, have you ever thought about this? Like, what is sex? Okay, the first place my mind went to, especially before doing this work, was, it's like penis and vagina, right? Like, sex is intercourse in a heterosexual couple. Like, I hadn't even challenged that idea. That's what sex is. Anything else is I don't know, foreplay or a variation on a theme, or I never thought this, but culturally I know it exists, this idea that something else might be an aberration. Okay, that's not helpful. I think it's really important that we think about what actually is sex, because again, our ideas about what sex is inform what we expect and what we think of as normal. So I want to challenge you a little bit to think about this. Okay, so when I started to think about coming up with a definition for sex, I had a couple of things that really mattered to me. Okay, first of all, it has to be inclusive. Sex has to be accessible to everybody. Everyone can have sex. And I want to say in one form or another, but even that sort of changes what I'm talking about. It makes it sound like there's a best way or something, or there's one way. Really, sex needs to be inclusive. Okay, that's a non-negotiable from my point of view. Okay, it needs, from my perspective, to focus on pleasure and connection rather than any particular acts or body parts. Like, what is sex for? In my mind, it's for pleasure and it's for connection. Okay, and the other thing that I think is crucial if we're going to define sex is that it is based in consent. Okay, so I have had clients come to therapy and talk about losing their virginity to rape. I don't think so. I don't think it's sex when it's non-consensual, when it's assault, when it's coercive, when it's manipulative. That is not sex in my book. Okay, it's like it doesn't matter what was done with certain body parts. It's all about consent and mindset and attitude and relationship. So if we're going to think about that, every couple can have sex. Every person can have sex. You know, if you're paralyzed in a wheelchair, you can still have sex. If, you know, you don't have the sort of anticipated body parts, you can have sex. You don't have the use of all your body parts, you can still have sex. Totally inclusive. It's about pleasure and connection, and it's about doing it consensually. Okay. So for an exercise, I actually looked up sex on the internet, you know, in some dictionaries, and some definitions are better than others, but a couple of them that I came across that I just want to throw out, right? Sexual intercourse, especially between a man and a woman. What? I mean, makes me want to choke. Sexual activity, including specifically sexual intercourse. Don't you love, specifically and especially, it's like it's so biased. And then lastly, any function or behavior involved with reproduction, as if that's the point. I mean, certainly that's one outcome, right? That's one reason to have sex, but that's not the goal. So all of these definitions are so limiting and so focused on one particular aspect, whether it's reproduction or intercourse or man and a woman, in ways that are not inclusive and are not useful, okay? Certainly this displays what's called heteronormativity, this idea that what's expected is a heterosexual relationship, and everything else is, you know, at least an exception, if not a problem. Okay, throw that away. These definitions are focused on penis in vagina, as if it's dependent on certain body parts and doing certain things. Throw that out. Okay. It's also, you know, reveals sort of what's, you know, the ableism, this idea that we expect people to be able-bodied, you know, and there's no room in here for what do people do if they don't work the way other people work. So when I was trying to figure out how do I put into words then what sex actually is, here's what I came up with. And I would say this is still a work in progress. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've got a better way to put this in words or other things I haven't thought about, aspects of this, you know, please leave some comments. Get in touch, because I want this to be maybe this will be a joint effort in redefining sex. But what I came up with is that sex is the physical expression of our innate drives for love, intimacy, and pleasure. That's all it is, right? A physical expression of those drives. In whatever way that looks, with whomever we want to do that, with whatever body parts, intimacy, love, and pleasure, connection. That's what I think it is. Okay, one way I talk about sex that I think helps communicate some of this is I talk about, think of sex like you're going to the playground. Okay, and I don't mean that in a childish way. I mean that in you're going on an adventure. You're going on an outing with your partner. And that's what matters. It doesn't matter what you do when you get there. The whole point is to just go and share an encounter. Nothing says you have to go down the slide, right? You head out, you go to the playground, you do what you feel like doing while you're there. You do the next thing you feel like doing while you're there. You only stay as long as you want to stay. And no matter what, it's a success. Like, you can't fail that. You could go and just sit on the bench and turn around and go home. Great. You at least went together, right? Maybe it turns into a long extended play date. Well, great. But there's no value judgment here. So if you can start to think about sex with that kind of flexibility and that kind of permission, we're just showing up. And we go with what we feel like doing when we're there. And everything we do together is a plus, is a benefit, is a win. That's what I think will help you in transforming your sex life now, because that's not how most of us approach it. So that's when I talk about mindset shift, that's really what I'm talking about. Now that we have sort of, hopefully, a shared understanding of what sex is, or at least you have my view of what sex is, I want to go over some rules or agreements or assumptions that I'd like you to at least invite you to consider accepting. Okay, this is what I think is going to set you up for success in your relationship. So, and a lot of these sort of overlap, so they're a little bit arbitrary in terms of different rules, because you're going to see how they flow together. But the first one is that each of you is responsible for yourself. Okay, we are supposed to play what I call our own side of the court. We're responsible for ourselves. It is not up to you to take care of me or me to take care of you. We take care of ourselves. Now, that does not mean we are not interdependent, that we are not considerate of each other. I'm not saying that. But the primary responsibility is with ourselves, to know what it is we want and to set boundaries and set limits and speak up. And, if we each are responsible for ourselves, the jobs get clearer. It's not so murky about whether I'm supposed to avoid asking you for things because I can't trust you to say no, things like that. All right, so we're responsible for ourselves. And this is going to be important in sex as well as in your relationship in general. Now, similarly, we are, I think, responsible for our own pleasure. Now, it's, we certainly enlist each other in that. There are things I might want my partner to be doing to me that feel great, right? But ultimately, my pleasure is my responsibility. I need to know what I want. I need to speak up about that. I need to take some ownership, and I need to enlist you in my pleasure, right? But it is not your job to magically know what I want and to produce it. And I hear this, people struggle with this all the time, and they feel such relief if we can shift this around, that I don't need to, again, sort of magically know what you want and deliver this perfect thing for you. It's actually your job to figure it out and communicate what I need to know to be an effective lover. It's going to be way more productive and helpful and less stressful, I would say, if you can accept that. I guess related to this too, there's a rule that you need to say no when you need to say no. Okay, this relates to taking care of yourself. So you can't really say yes if you can't say no. And you need to be able to discern, do I need to say no to something to take care of myself, to really stay in my integrity, to not violate myself, to, not give myself away. And if I'm clear about that, I need to say no, then I need to do that. That's what trust is based on this in a relationship. Because if I can't trust you to say no, then I can't trust your yes. Does that make sense? I mean, really think about that. If I'm going to stop asking you questions, or I'm not going to speak up about what I want, if I'm not really sure that you'll be honest with me, right? People start to second guess and sort of play the other person's side of the court, and I'm worried about them, and they don't really set appropriate boundaries. So all of a sudden I've got to back off really speaking up about what I want because I don't have somebody who's going to say no if they need to. This is crucial to trust. I really think that all of your trust in a relationship is built on say no when you need to say no, and your partner's ability, the other person's ability to tolerate hearing a no. Crucial skills. So having that understanding that each of you are going to say no when you need to, and celebrating that, recognizing that as a good thing, is going to set you guys up for success. Okay, another rule or understanding, I guess I would say, is that what you want is okay. There's nothing wrong with what you want. Now, I'm not talking about things that are illegal or non-consensual, there is a subset of things that are not okay, at least to do. But that's not what this is about. What I'm talking about is that everybody's eroticism and everybody's sexual desires and everybody's way that they are is valid, and it's actually important. And so stop pathologizing each other, stop criticizing each other for what you want or how much you want sex or anything like that. You've got to figure out a way that both of you can be okay and yet work together and collaborate. That's what's really crucial is who am I, who are you, and how are we going to work together? And blaming and criticizing and stuff like that is not going to be helpful. Okay, so an understanding that within legal bounds, what everybody wants is okay. You're just going to have to figure out what to do from there.
Hey, I'm just taking a quick little break in the middle of the show. Most of you probably know, if you've been listening at all, that I have written a new book called Sex Without Stress. But what you may not know is that I have developed an online course to support you through the process. The book has a lot in it. It's a do-it-yourself process to totally transform your sex life, but it's hard to do it. And it's hard to do it alone without support. So I have been looking for a way to create an environment that's supportive and could help you actually get this stuff done. So what I've done is create an 8-week course. There are webinars that you can watch live or you can watch later. There's materials, there are exercises and directions, and then I'm going to offer live online office hours. This is where you can get questions answered and get input on your situation. It's not therapy, but it's a place to come and help you move through the process. The next cohort starts January 28th, 2019, taking enrollment all the way up until then. You can learn more at sexwithoutstress.com. Easy to find the online course information there if you want some more information. I would love to have you join me.
All right, another one of my, this is, it's a soapbox episode, but this is really up on my soapbox. And this may be semantics, but I believe that open is better than vulnerable. Okay, to me, vulnerable means that you can be decimated, destroyed, like you are open to sort of attack and ruin. And I don't think that's a good thing to be. By contrast, open means you're totally unguarded, right? You're totally open and available and present, and you can be hurt, but you can't be destroyed. The difference is there's enough sense of who you are and enough validation of yourself, like enough ego strength or security or something like that, that you can withstand criticism or hurt or whatever it is you're going to get from your partner. So do you understand the difference there? Like open, it's the same amount of authenticity and lack of shame and all this stuff, but there's enough strength to withstand whatever your partner's reaction to you is. So I think this is crucial. Not that you necessarily have to use the same words, or you might still want to use the word vulnerable. I'm not going to fault you for that. But this concept that we need to be able to validate ourselves enough to be okay, regardless of how our partner responds to us. Okay, this is going to come up again later in another one of the rules. Okay, so similar to needing to say no when we need to say no, where safety comes into the relationship is from honesty. So the trust that you will say no when you need to say no, and also the trust that you're going to tell it like it is. A lot of people talk as if safety in a relationship comes from this sort of soft landing, this warm response to whatever we have to say. You make me safe because you don't challenge me. You're not mean. You're not, you validate all my feelings and thoughts. That's not actually safe, at least if it isn't real, right? So this facade or accommodation isn't safe. So honesty is actually safe. So if you're telling me something and it's not what I want to hear, but it's true for you, that's safe. That's secure. I'm not going to get blindsided later. So, in relationships, we tend to have this phenomenon of holding back and going along and being okay with stuff on the outside, even though on the inside we aren't. And that stuff festers. We can end up getting resentful. I can put aside my own desires for a while because I haven't wanted to make you uncomfortable. All this stuff comes out over time. And at that point, somebody feels blindsided. And that's when we realize that this sense of safety wasn't really real. It was sort of built on shifting sand instead of on solid ground. So real safety in a relationship comes from honesty. And I'm not talking cruelty. I'm not talking about, being mean just to be mean, but really speaking your truth and speaking up and being willing to rock the boat. That's where safety really is. Even though it can feel very difficult, like it can feel unsettling, it's still safe. Next rule is ask for what you want, but you also have to tolerate not getting it. Okay, it's crucial that each person is in touch with what they want and is willing to advocate for that. You speak up about it. You ask for it, right? Each person should be doing that. But just because you muster up the courage to ask for what you want or speak about it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it. You're dealing with another actual person who has other desires, right? So the two of you still have to collaborate or compromise or take turns or whatever you're going to have to do. But your job is to ask for what you want and then, of course, tolerate maybe not getting it. Okay, here's one. It's your job to share what's on your mind in general. And this is sort of like being responsible for yourself. It's not your partner's job to notice that you're withdrawn and quiet and kind of down, and they have to pursue you and ask you what's going on and get you to talk about it and, sort of chase you onto your side of the court. It's your job to bring it up. If you've got a problem, if you've got a complaint, if you've got something happy you want to celebrate, bring it up. Okay? That's playing your side of the court. It's not about reading minds, and it's not about, oh gosh, if they knew me well enough or really attuned, they'd notice, and they would show that by coming after me and saying, what's going on, honey? You don't seem okay. I mean, there's room to do that for each other occasionally, but mostly it's your job to bring it up if something's going on for you. Life is going to get simpler. Think about the relief you might feel. I mean, certainly I've had clients that feel very sad of giving up this idea that their partner should just read them and ask. And yet, then they're relieved about having to do that for their partner. I mean, life gets so much simpler if you're each responsible to bring up your stuff, right? The rules are clear. I guess related to that, the next rule is lay your cards down first, which means talk about what's going on for you and what you think and feel about something before you ask your partner what they think and feel. So I see people do this. It sort of becomes a trap. What are you thinking about my mother? Or whatever else you might ask your partner. You're getting them to sort of play their hand and talk about how they think or feel, either before you reveal yourself, because you're going to change what you say based on what you hear from your partner. So that's one thing. I want to hear what you're going to say first, and then I'm going to line up with that. So I'm not going to really talk about what I'm feeling. I'm going to hide behind what you're feeling. Or we ask our partner to play their hand first. We get them to talk, and then we get mad at them for what they say. Right? It's a trap. We ask them, and then there's a right or a wrong answer, and they get it wrong in our minds, and then they get in trouble. None of that helps a relationship. Okay? So the general rule is you talk about what you think and feel first, and then you ask your partner. You're willing to reveal what's going on for you and take the risk of putting your cards down on the table before you ask your partner to reveal theirs. Okay? So that's going to be helpful also. Then I'm thinking about a couple of conversational or communication rules. Okay. Empathize first and then respond. So what this means is, when we're having especially difficult communication, we often are building our defense or our rebuttal while we're listening to our partner, right? We're very busy figuring out our side of the argument or our side of the debate or the disagreement rather than really understanding what our partner is saying. So the rule of thumb here is to empathize first. See if you can get in your partner's shoes and totally see it from their perspective. Can you see how it makes sense given what they saw or heard, given their particular baggage from their family, given the thoughts that they have about that and the emotions. It doesn't mean you have to agree, but can you empathize? Can you legitimately say, wow, I can see how you see it. That makes sense to me. Then you get to respond. Okay, so if the two of you can do that for each other, your relationship's going to go better. I may have to do a whole other episode just on communication because there's a lot in here. Another concept that's related to this is addressing what's called the interpersonal gap. So in communication, we have a gap between what someone's intention is and what the impact is on the listener. All right, so when those don't match up, it's called the interpersonal gap. This was developed in the 60s by Wallen. So we have to figure out what happened. So we have to notice, first of all, that there was a gap. When we say something and we get a response from our partner that seems out of proportion or surprising or unexpected or we don't understand it, that's certainly a clue that there's been a gap. Something has happened for our partner that doesn't line up with what we were intending to communicate. And we have to take that apart. We have to say, what did you hear? What are you reacting to? Sometimes we're hitting the sort of tip of the iceberg on things that are happening between us in our relationship. Sometimes it's triggered old baggage from their family of origin, as it's called, whatever it is. But we have to take apart, what did I mean? What was I actually trying to communicate? What did you hear? What was the impact on you? And how are those different? And how can we clear up the miscommunication and the misunderstanding so we totally understand each other? And again, empathizing first is helpful in this process, right? Really try to understand, okay, this is what I was saying and what I really was trying to communicate. This is what you heard. Let's keep at this process until we really understand each other. One more communication tool. Differentiate between thoughts and feelings. And this is tricky. These are hard habits to break, but feelings are emotions. They fall into 4 basic categories: sad, mad, glad, and afraid. So when you say, I feel something, make sure it's an emotion or potentially a body sensation, okay? Anything else are thoughts. They're beliefs. They are meaning that we are adding to things. And I'll tell you, here's why it's important. Because if you say, I feel like you don't value me, okay, that's not an emotion. But if you try to argue with me, I may say, you can't challenge it. You can't tell me how I'm feeling. I mean, I see this in clients all the time. Well, it's not a feeling. My feeling is sad, potentially, or hurt. That's valid, right? That can't be challenged. But the meaning I'm making of it, the thought I have that you don't value me, is right or it isn't. I mean, that may or may not be correct. And there's room to examine that and see where it's coming from and to discuss it and figure it out with our partner if we don't claim it as a feeling that can't be challenged. So I am going to invite you to really pay attention to this in your communication with your partner, because I see people do this. I still do this wrong all the time. It's such a habit to say, I feel X, Y, and Z when X, Y, and Z is a thought. So instead you would say, the meaning I make of that is, or the story I have is this, or my belief is this, or I think this, or I wonder if this. All those are thinking words, which allows you to hold it with a little bit loosely, with a little curiosity about whether you're right or you're wrong. That opens up a conversation with your partner. Okay, so that's second to last agreement to make, is you're going to start to be clear about differentiating between thoughts and feelings, which are emotions. And then the last one, which circles back a little bit, is to validate yourself rather than depend on validation from your partner. So what that means is, we like to it feels great to get validation from our partner when they love us and they think we're wonderful and they love our ideas and they agree with us and all this stuff. But if we require that, if we need it, it causes trouble in our relationship, because we either pressure our partner to act like they accept us when they don't, right? And that's sort of tyranny, really. Or we start to hold back who we really are, and we're not going to show the parts of ourselves that our partner doesn't like. Either way, it erodes the intimacy in the relationship. We're not being, each of us, truly who we are. So when you get to the point instead of knowing who you are and feeling good about it yourself, making sure you can feel good about it, right? You confront yourself if you can't. Then we've got the strength to know this is just who I am and how I feel, and it's all right if my partner disagrees. I don't have to crumble. I don't have to give up on what I want. I can still compromise, but I don't have to accommodate or become a chameleon or drop parts of myself, hide parts of myself. And I also don't have to pressure my partner to give away who they are and what they think in order to make me feel okay. So I know I've covered a lot. That's a lot of different rules, but I think that using these as a framework going forward, because I'm going to talk more about transforming your sex life, these are the assumptions that I'm going to work from. So you may not agree with all of them, but I think they'd be at least helpful to consider, right? I would love to hear feedback. If you've got ideas about any of these, if you've got experiences with any of them, certainly if you have questions, get in touch. Maybe you've noticed that on my Better Sex Podcast website, at the bottom of every single page in the footer, there is a way to record questions. So if you want to ask a question specifically about any of these, I would love to hear it, and potentially I will answer it on a future show. So thanks for being with me.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.